Las Vegas, Nevada, February 1982. 7 men were inside the back training room at the Dunes Hotel. The door was locked from the inside. One of them would later say, it wasn't supposed to happen. Mike Tyson was 15 years old. Explosive. Unforgiving. Already feared in the amateur circuit. Bruce Lee had been dead for nearly 9 years. And yet what unfolded in that room would be retold, quietly, in fragments, as if those present were unsure whether they had witnessed arrogance collapse, or something else entirely. 10 seconds into the first exchange, the heavy bag in the corner was swinging. Nobody remembers who moved it. They only remember that Tyson stopped advancing. Bruce Lee never spoke about it. And Tyson, years later, would pause when his name came up. The method was never explained. But the silence was. February 1982, Las Vegas, Nevada. The Dunes Hotel sat at the northern edge of the Strip, largely overlooked by tourists but quietly hosting fighters, trainers, and promoters in its backrooms. That winter, the hotel gym was under renovation, leaving a smaller concrete training space, dimly lit, with mats worn thin from years of heavy bag swings and grappling. It was here that the unusual gathering took place, 7 men, some named, some remembered only by initials, converging in a room designed for work, not spectacle. Bruce Lee had been dead nearly 9 years. Officially, the world knew him only as a film icon, a martial artist whose lightning speed had been captured in carefully choreographed cinema. But among certain martial arts circles, rumors lingered, of private challenges, of underground fights where skill was tested without cameras, without applause. Bruce's speed and precision were admired, but they were also questioned. Could he survive, really, against an opponent trained in pure, uncompromising striking? At the same time, 15-year-old Mike Tyson was emerging in upstate New York under the watchful eye of Cus D'Amato. Already notorious for first-round knockouts, Tyson carried both raw power and the strategic mind D'Amato had nurtured, peekaboo defense, explosive combinations, and a psychological intensity that unnerved adults far older than him. By February 1982, he was traveling for exposure to larger gyms and tougher sparring partners. In this context, the encounter was more than curiosity. It was a test of legitimacy. Boxers like Tyson measured skill in observable outcomes, bruises, knockdowns, and the ability to maintain composure under assault. Bruce Lee's reputation, while legendary in film, remained largely theoretical in these circles. The question hanging over that small Las Vegas room was simple but heavy: could the man whose speed had been immortalized on screen survive in real combat against a fighter conditioned to inflict maximum damage? Witnesses later recalled the tension as almost tangible. R.M., the cut man, described the air as charged, like waiting for a storm to hit. Another witness, a local trainer, remembered glancing at Bruce and noting that despite the years since his death, he appeared as he always had, calm posture, centered stance, and eyes that observed with unsettling clarity. Yet there was vulnerability, too. Bruce was stepping into the unknown. A teenager's raw power, honed by repetition and instinct, could not be fully anticipated, not even by someone of his skill. The stakes, therefore, were both physical and psychological. Bruce faced the possibility of injury, the risk of misjudgment, and the moral weight of deciding whether to respond with lethal force or measured control. Tyson, in contrast, approached with certainty. For him, this was practice, not philosophy. This was not a performance. There were no cameras, no audience, no prearranged choreography. There was only the room, the fighters, and the witnesses, and a shared awareness that what would happen in the next moments would either validate legend, or shatter it. By the time Bruce entered that room, the world outside believed in myths of speed and control. Inside, every movement, every breath, was a calculation, a negotiation with reality itself. The question hung in the air: would Bruce Lee's private legend survive the pressure of real, unscripted combat? Mike Tyson, 15 years old, 5 feet 10 inches, approximately 190 pounds. The boy in the room was already a storm contained within muscle and instinct. Under Cus D'Amato's guidance, he had learned to move explosively yet economically, a predator with timing, structure, and relentless forward pressure. His reputation preceded him among the small circle of witnesses: first-round knockouts, the uncanny ability to close distance, and a stare that unnerved older fighters. In the Dunes backroom, that stare was fixed on the man who, in the outside world, existed only in myth. Tyson's danger was not theatrical. It was concrete. His hands were heavy, trained to deliver the kind of power that could fracture ribs in a single blow. His legs, though short for a heavyweight, carried him with coiled velocity, capable of explosive forward momentum. He had been taught to hit first and hit hard, to force the opponent to react before assessing the threat. Each muscle in his body was conditioned to collapse the distance between him and his target in the blink of an eye. Witness testimony from RM, the cut man, was precise: "I've seen pros step back, circle, gauge each other. This kid? He was ready to enter and end before thinking." There was nothing casual about him. Another trainer, present that day but preferring anonymity, remembered how Tyson's frame seemed disproportionately compact, deceptive for a fighter still technically in adolescence. "You underestimated him for a second," the trainer said, "and that second could have broken you." Importantly, this was not a stunt. There were no cameras. No bets. No promoters lining the corners of the room. The encounter was arranged privately, almost spontaneously, by a group of trainers and gym affiliates who wanted to observe, quietly, the intersection of legend and raw power. For Tyson, there was no performance. Every punch he threw carried intent, every forward step measured, calculated, and ruthless in potential. What made Tyson credible was more than size or speed. It was his commitment to outcome. Unlike most 15-year-olds, he had been taught the psychological discipline to maintain aggression under pressure, to mask fatigue, and to adapt in real time to unpredictable responses. He was not improvising. He was operating within a system of training designed to maximize damage while minimizing exposure. And yet, he was still a teenager. Emotional impulses flickered beneath his control: pride, curiosity, the hunger to dominate. These impulses would interact unpredictably with Bruce Lee's calm yet lethal precision. Witnesses noted subtle micro-expressions that suggested Tyson was both curious and cautious. "He didn't hesitate to step in," one witness said, "but you could tell he felt something different." This intersection of raw adolescent force and meticulously honed skill created a psychological tension that would define the encounter. Tyson was dangerous. Credible. Experienced in controlled sparring, yet untested against the kind of speed and unpredictability Bruce represented. The challenge that day was real. Tyson was not playing at legend. He was the instrument of pressure. And Bruce Lee, stepping into the room, was about to be confronted with a test that few imagined could exist: the collision of cinematic legend with uncompromising teenage power. Las Vegas, February 1982, the back room at the Dunes Hotel. The room measured roughly 22 by 18 feet. Concrete floors, thin mats for cushioning, and a single heavy bag hanging in the corner, swaying lightly from previous workouts. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered intermittently, casting shadows that amplified every movement. It was functional, not impressive, a space built for training, not spectacle. No ring ropes, no audience, no camera crews. 7 men were present: RM, the cut man, who had worked at local amateur shows for over a decade, observing fighters' reactions to real force. 2 local trainers, quietly leaning against the walls, arms folded. A visiting amateur referee, noted for his strict adherence to rules in sanctioned bouts. A hotel athletic coordinator, assigned to manage equipment and scheduling. 2 unnamed assistants, whose only function was to ensure no one entered mid-session. All 7 were silent witnesses. Some would later speak of tension so thick it pressed down on your shoulders. There were no formal rules. Light sparring had been agreed upon verbally, but no one defined the boundaries. Gloves were involved, though reports vary on size. Bruce's hands were wrapped, Tyson wore 12-ounce training gloves. Beyond that, there was an understanding, a tacit acknowledgement that this encounter could escalate if either fighter misjudged. Distance at the start was approximately 6 feet. Enough to initiate probing jabs or swift kicks. Enough for either party to retreat if necessary. The emotional atmosphere was taut. Every witness described a strange duality, curiosity mixed with apprehension. Bruce Lee, though long deceased, carried the presence of a man who measured every movement and breath. Tyson carried forward energy, youthful, untested against someone of Bruce's precise speed but lethal if miscalculated. Physical details added to the stakes. The floor mats offered limited cushioning for falls. The heavy bag could be struck, but its swing also created a visual distraction, amplifying miscalculations. There were walls less than 2 feet from the corners, limiting lateral movement. Even a small misstep could result in collision, injury, or misjudged distance. Witnesses recalled Bruce adjusting his stance as he entered, slight belating of the body, weight centered, eyes scanning Tyson's posture, hands ready. Tyson, compact and coiled, advanced with a subtle forward lean, ready to explode. There was no fanfare, no ceremony. The room felt compressed by anticipation. The psychological tension was amplified by the setting. A private, enclosed space leaves no margin for error. Both fighters were under observation, but the observers were passive, their role purely to witness, to document, and to react if a line was crossed. Each movement carried more weight than it would have in a spacious gym or public bout. In short, the conditions were intimate, constrained, and uncontrolled. Perfect for testing skill, risk, and decision-making under pressure. Bruce's challenge was not only the opponent's power but the room itself, its limitations, its geometry, and its suffocating immediacy. Tyson's challenge was similar. He faced a legend whose reputation suggested danger beyond visible force. Both men entered fully aware that this was more than sparring. It was a collision of physics, strategy, and psychological presence, a moment that demanded respect, caution, and control. Every observer sensed that what happened in the next seconds would not be forgotten. The air in the small dunes backroom was charged, almost suffocating, as the two stepped into position. Bruce Lee, stance slightly bladed, weight centered over the balls of his feet, eyes measuring Tyson's compact frame. Tyson, crouched in peekaboo guard, coiled like a spring, shoulders tight, legs ready to launch. Distance, 6 feet. Tyson moved first. His approach was a blur to anyone unprepared, but witnesses noted the mechanical precision behind each step. A forward shift, slight bob of the head, left hand probing the line, right hand cocked, he closed half the distance in under 2 seconds. Bruce did not retreat immediately. Instead, he adjusted subtly, a micro-pivot to align his shoulders, hands rising just enough to intercept while maintaining fluid motion. Then came the first contact. Tyson threw a left to the body, tight, snapping with intent. Bruce's forearm met it obliquely, absorbing impact without full resistance, redirecting energy rather than trying to block. Witness RM recalled, "I expected Bruce to circle. He didn't. He stepped inside the line, which, you could almost see Tyson pause for a microsecond. That's not hesitation. That's recalculation." Within 3 seconds, Bruce delivered a low kick to Tyson's lead thigh, controlled, solid, audible against the mats. Not a flashy cinematic strike. Real impact. Tyson's stance wavered slightly, a subtle shift that even he could not fully hide. Tyson adjusted immediately, pivoting into a right hook toward Bruce's ribs. Bruce absorbed part of it with his shoulder, then used the contact to pivot his body out of the line, simultaneously off-balancing Tyson with a brief palm press to the shoulder. It was not a knockout attempt, but a physical recalibration, a demonstration that Bruce could manipulate distance and angle while remaining intact. The heavy bag in the corner began to swing. Witnesses reported the movement, not from contact, but from the air displacement caused by Bruce's footwork and Tyson's adjustments. The room, small and enclosed, amplified every subtle movement, every shift in posture. Speed and control were in constant tension. Tyson's youth and explosive power made him aggressive. Bruce's precision allowed him to navigate threats without overcommitting. The exchange was almost imperceptibly escalating. Each move built on the previous, creating micro-stakes. A misstep could result in bruising, a trip, or exposure to a fully committed strike. Witnesses noted the psychological shift. Tyson's aggression, previously linear and relentless, slowed fractionally. Not hesitation, but recognition, the man in front of him moved in ways that disrupted instinct, altered timing, and challenged raw power. Bruce's eyes were calm, but they held intensity, awareness of each threat, each opening, each potential line of attack. By 10 seconds, the atmosphere had shifted. The room, once full of potential energy and expectation, settled into a quiet, tense observation. Tyson had not been knocked down, he had not been humiliated. But control had visibly transferred, if only subtly. The first exchange ended not with a strike or a victory, but with a pause. Both men had communicated through movement alone, demonstrating skill, speed, and judgment. Witnesses later emphasized the silence. It wasn't fear. It was understanding. Something had changed in the room. Bruce's control had not eliminated danger, it had highlighted it. And Tyson, even in adolescence, had been forced to acknowledge that raw power could be guided, manipulated, and neutralized by a precise, experienced hand. The room's tension had solidified. The first exchange had been a test, a probing dance, but it was clear to everyone present that the encounter would escalate. Tyson, still 15 but already formidable, adjusted his approach. His movements were tighter, more aggressive, a deliberate attempt to close any space Bruce might exploit. He feinted a jab, then drove a series of short hooks to the midsection, testing both Bruce's defense and willingness to absorb force. Bruce responded with minimal motion, economy of effort, but each action carried weight. He intercepted body hooks with forearm deflection, redirected Tyson's momentum with subtle shoulder contacts, and occasionally shifted laterally to disrupt rhythm. Witness RM recalled the audible sound of controlled contact, a dull thump here, a heavy press there. Each micro-impact confirmed real stakes. Then Tyson landed a right hook to Bruce's ribs. Not hard enough to floor him, but strong enough to force a breath outward, the first sign of vulnerability. Bruce recoiled slightly, pivoting to maintain balance, aware that overextension could result in an actual injury. Witnesses noticed a subtle change. Bruce's breathing had become uneven, his normally fluid footwork carrying a sharper edge, reflecting the physical pressure he faced. Tyson pressed forward, combinations tightening. There was intent behind every strike, a forward weight that left Bruce with a moral choice. In that instant, he could retaliate with force capable of incapacitating a fighter many times Tyson's age and experience. But he chose control. His strikes remained precise, measured, and non-lethal. A short elbow check here, a palm press there, a calculated low-line sweep that unbalanced Tyson without slamming him. Bruce's decision was deliberate, demonstrate skill, assert dominance, but stopped short of destruction. For a brief moment, vulnerability surfaced. Witnesses observed a micro-expression, an almost imperceptible tightening around Bruce's eyes, as if he had glimpsed the consequences of misjudgment. A single miscalculation could break Tyson, or worse, result in injury to himself. This psychological tension, the moral calculus between harm and mastery, was as intense as any physical exchange. Tyson, still advancing, was momentarily off balance. His forward drive met Bruce's pivot, his explosive energy redirected. Bruce maintained physical control, but it was more than that, he had imposed judgment. Every strike, every redirection, was filtered through ethical restraint. Witnesses later reflected that in those seconds, Bruce Lee was confronted with the limits of his own power, not the mythic speed of cinema, but the raw, immediate danger of a human body in motion, and the weight of choice. The room seemed to hold its collective breath. Tyson dropped to one knee, not defeated, but temporarily disrupted. Bruce did not follow. He stepped back, maintained stance, and allowed Tyson to regain composure. The act of restraint resonated in the small space, leaving a psychological imprint on everyone present. This was not dominance in the sense of victory, it was mastery of consequence. Bruce Lee had faced the possibility of harming a powerful, aggressive opponent and had chosen control over annihilation. He had been tested physically, morally, and psychologically, and survived intact on all fronts. The observers understood immediately, the strongest move had not been the strike that could have ended the encounter, but the one withheld. Bruce Lee's calm precision had masked the complexity of decision-making under extreme conditions, leaving both fighters, and the witnesses, with a shared recognition of measured power. The encounter ended without formal declaration of a winner. Tyson rose from his brief kneeling position with a single nod, acknowledgement, not submission. His breathing was steady, his youth and aggression intact. Bruce Lee, though visibly exerted, maintained composure, his body taut but controlled. Witnesses recalled the unusual quiet that followed. Aram, the cut man, said, "It wasn't shock. It wasn't awe. It was understanding." Both men knew what had happened, even if no one else fully grasped it. The room's tension slowly dissipated, replaced by a shared awareness that a legend had been tested under conditions few had ever imagined. The encounter did not enter newspapers or magazines. No film crew recorded it. The event lived only in fragmented testimonies, whispered stories, and subtle gestures of recognition. Bruce Lee's legacy, already global through cinema and martial arts philosophy, gained a quieter, more visceral dimension among those present. The legend had been confronted with real danger and responded with both skill and ethical judgment. Tyson, years later, referenced the meeting sparingly. In private conversations, he described the man he faced as, not playing, not like anyone else. He did not elaborate, leaving the memory as a haunting benchmark, a collision of youth and raw power with experience, speed, and moral restraint. Observers noted that even in adolescence, Tyson carried a new respect for precision over sheer force. For Bruce Lee, the psychological imprint was subtler but no less significant. Witnesses observed that his movements carried a hint of weariness after the session, a recognition that mastery carries responsibility. He had faced not just a younger, powerful opponent, but the unpredictability of human aggression, and he had exercised choice. That choice, to contain potential destruction, defined the encounter more than any strike landed. It reflected his awareness of consequences, a control beyond physical technique. Over time, each witness preserved fragments of memory with remarkable consistency. The trainer who had leaned against the wall recalled the moral tension. It wasn't about winning. It was about knowing what you could do, and deciding if it was necessary. The referee, who rarely spoke of the event, mentioned that he had never seen such a quiet assertion of dominance, a fighter capable of overwhelming force, yet choosing measured response. Long-term, the encounter contributed to a deeper understanding of Bruce Lee's practical skill. The myth of invincible speed was replaced, for those present, by an appreciation of situational mastery, observation, timing, precision, and ethical judgment under stress. Tyson, as he matured into a professional, carried an unspoken benchmark of combat awareness, an early encounter that had subtly informed his instincts and respect for controlled power. The final, lasting impression among all witnesses was captured in a single observation, often repeated quietly over the years: the strongest man in that room wasn't the one who could hit hardest. It was the one who decided how hard he needed to. The room at the Dunes Hotel remained silent after Bruce and Tyson left. Not silence of fear, not silence of awe, but silence of understanding, a recognition of human limits, choices, and the weight of controlled power. It lingered in the memory of those who witnessed it, a story buried from the world but preserved in the subtle, enduring tension between capability and restraint. For Bruce Lee, it reaffirmed a truth he had always known: mastery is not measured solely by what you can do, but by what you choose not to. For Tyson, it planted a seed of respect for precision and timing that would echo through every fight he later faced. Silence remained. And in that silence, the legend endured, quietly, tangibly, and irrevocably human.